Hi everyone, my name is Marc Bates. I'm a metabolic health coach, and today's topic is the science that vindicates beef as a true health food. For decades, beef has been unfairly cast as a villain in the story of human health. We've been told to limit red meat, avoid saturated fat, and fear cholesterol. These warnings have become so deeply embedded in our collective understanding that they're rarely questioned. But what if this nutritional dogma is based on flawed science? The evidence challenging conventional dietary wisdom has been mounting for years. Researchers are discovering that many of our assumptions about beef, fat, and heart disease just don't stand up to scientific scrutiny. So, let's start with, how did beef become the enemy? The demonization of beef gained momentum during the 1960s and 1970s, a period marked by the hypotheses that dietary fat, especially saturated fat, was a leading cause of heart disease. This led to dietary guidelines advocating for reduced consumption of red meat and other animal products. Before this paradigm shift, carbohydrates were widely recognized as the dietary component most likely to cause weight gain. As British nutritionists wrote in the 1960s, every woman knows that carbohydrates are fattening. This is a piece of common knowledge which few nutritionists would dispute. Fat became the primary target almost overnight, and carbohydrates were hailed as the cornerstone of a healthy diet. This shift not due to a significant change in scientific evidence, but rather the rapid political acceptance of a particular hypothesis. The result? Americans reduced their consumption of animal fats and increased their intake of carbohydrates. Obesity and diabetes rates skyrocketed since. What the science shows about saturated fat. Contrary to decades of warnings, systematic evidence reviews show that saturated fat does not directly increase the risk of heart disease. The finding contradicts one of the fundamental assumptions behind anti-beef dietary advice. Nini Teicholz, author of The Big Fat Surprise, a wonderful book, which is suggested reading, spent years examining the scientific literature on fat and health. Her conclusion was startling. The evidence against saturated fat was never strong in the first place. Thus, some of the evidence against saturated fat over the past half-century amounts to this. The early trials that condemned it were unsound. The epidemiological data showed no negative association, and saturated fat's effects on LDL cholesterol, when properly measured, is neutral. Teicholz writes, some research suggests that higher total cholesterol is associated with greater longevity, especially in women and seniors. Complete opposite of what we've been told. This directly contradicts the cholesterol-lowering advice that has been a cornerstone of dietary recommendations. Follow the money. Who pushes those dietary recommendations? Okay. Hint, the pharmaceutical companies that sell you a pill that lower your cholesterol. Think about that. The nutritional value of beef. Beef is far from just a protein source. It's a treasure trove of nutrients crucial for human health. Few people realize that more than half of the fatty acids in beef are monosaturated fatty acids. Eating a steak is just not pure saturated fat. It's a bunch of monosaturated fatty acids as well as some polyunsaturated fats. It's a full mixture. It's exactly what your body's looking for. The same type of healthy food found in avocados and olive oil, for example, those monosaturated fats. This fact alone should cause us to reconsider beef's reputation. Additionally, approximately 1/3 of beef saturated fat is stearic acid, which neutralizes blood cholesterol levels. This is the same fatty acid recognized for its benefit in dark chocolate. Beef is also a complete protein source, providing all essential amino acids in proportions that human bodies can readily use. It contains highly bioavailable forms of iron, zinc, and vitamins B12, nutrients that are often difficult to obtain, if almost impossible, from plant sources. This nutrient density makes beef particularly valuable in human nutrition. gram for gram, beef delivers more essential nutrients than any other food, making it an efficient way to meet nutritional needs. It's extremely nutrient dense. This is one of the things we keep talking about on this channel. Beef and heart health, challenging the narrative. Perhaps the most surprising evidence comes from studies examining beef's impact on heart health markers. The Beef in an Optimally Lean Diet BOLD study found that consuming lean beef daily as part of a heart-healthy diet lowered LDL bad cholesterol by 10%, just as effectively as the DASH diet commonly recommended for heart health. Okay, couple things. Go back to a recent talk I just loaded up on bad science. Calling LDL bad cholesterol is bad science in the first place. Cholesterol is cholesterol, okay? And consuming lean beef is also bad science. You should be eating fatty beef. But in this limited study, what they did find is that eating beef did present a lowering of the markers that they were looking for, right? But may not have been the correct markers in the first place. So could have been a completely bad study to begin with, okay? More recent research shows that Mediterranean-style eating patterns, including lean, unprocessed red meat, can support heart health as effectively as more restrictive diets. Now, one thing about Mediterranean diets, people talk about the Mediterranean diet. There is no single Mediterranean diet. But if you really look at what they're promoting, most people that talk about the Mediterranean diet are promoting a carb-intensive, very unhealthy diet. Okay? These findings directly contradict the assumption that beef consumption increases the risk of heart disease. Instead, they suggest that beef can be part of a heart-healthy dietary pattern. In fact, I will tell you that beef, ruminant meat, beef and lamb, bison, right, if you can get bison, are the cornerstone of a completely healthy, heart-healthy or body-healthy, brain-healthy, completely healthy dietary pattern. Okay? All right, real quick, please like, share, subscribe. It helps this channel immensely. Well, personally, thank you if you do this. Thank you. All right, the carbohydrate connection. Well, beef has been demonized. The role of carbohydrates in chronic disease has been largely overlooked. This oversight may explain why dietary guidelines haven't delivered the promised health benefits and improvements. When dietary fat is restricted, carbohydrates consumption inevitably increases to meet energy needs. Okay? Yet carbohydrates, particularly refined ones, raise insulin levels. Chronically elevated insulin can lead to insulin resistance. In fact, it almost always does. You do not get insulin resistance unless you have chronically elevated insulin levels. Okay? You almost can't find it. Which is associated with obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease. All the things associated with eating carbohydrates. Research from Duke University Medical Center found that low carbohydrate diets improved several heart risk factors. Participants showed a significant decrease in triglycerides, falling 74.2 points. That's an incredible amount. Increases in HDL cholesterol by 5.5 points. One of the things we look at for metabolic health is your HDL to LDL ratio. You should have more HDL than the average person does compared to your LDL. And a ketogenic and carnivore diet will help do that. These improvements occurred while participants ate more fat, including saturated fat from animal sources. This suggests that carbohydrate restriction, not fat restriction, may be more effective for improving cardiovascular risk factors. And I agree wholeheartedly with that. Okay. So the real question here is, if we have this connection between carbohydrates, insulin, and chronic disease, and that helps explain why low-fat dietary advice hasn't reduced rates of obesity and diabetes, right? And insulin resistance and aging, right, have continue to go up with a low-carbohydrate diet, right? chronically elevated insulin levels can lead to insulin resistance, where cells become less responsive to insulin signals. And insulin resistance is now recognized as a key factor in metabolic syndrome, a cluster of conditions that increases the risk of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. Approximately half of American adults either have metabolic syndrome or are developing it. Okay? High carbohydrate diets can exacerbate insulin resistance in susceptible individuals. In contrast, lower carbohydrate diets that include animal proteins and fats often improve insulin sensitivity and other metabolic markers. This suggests that beef may be part of the solution rather than the problem for many people. And going beyond heart disease, the implications of these findings extend far beyond heart health itself, but all your health, but looking specifically at heart health. Emerging research suggests connections between insulin resistance and other chronic conditions, including certain cancers. Right? Dr. Craig Thompson, President and CEO of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, has noted that overeating fat does not increase your cancer rate. Overeating carbohydrates dramatically increases your cancer rate. This statement directly contradicts conventional dietary advice that emphasizes carbohydrates over fats. Beef's protein and nutrients may also be essential in maintaining muscle mass, supporting immune function, and promoting brain health. These benefits are significant as people age. So let's rethink the dietary guidelines. Despite mounting evidence, dietary guidelines have been slow to change. The 2015 to 2020 dietary guidelines for Americans still recommend limiting saturated fat to less than 10% of calories and suggest choosing lean protein sources. Oh my God. Some advisory committees have even proposed removing lean meat from the definition of a healthy diet, despite the evidence supporting its nutritional value. These guys are bought and paid for by Big Agra and Big Pharma. The resistance, in my opinion only, right? This resistance to change reflects the political nature of dietary guidelines. As researcher Dr. Edward Ahrens observed in 1978, for a generation, research on heart disease has been more political than scientific. His observation remains relevant today. A more nuanced approach. The evidence doesn't suggest that everyone should eat unlimited amounts of beef. Right? There are some people who just don't get along that way. Instead, it indicates that beef can be part of a healthy diet for most people, particularly when consumed in a diet that doesn't overemphasize carbohydrates. That's the key here. Is if you're overemphasizing carbohydrates, eating beef may not be a good thing, because the combination of carbohydrates, fat, and protein all at the same time can cause problems for many people. Individual responses to different dietary patterns vary based on genetics, activity levels, metabolic health, that's a big one, and other factors. Some people thrive on higher carbohydrate diets, while others do better with more protein and fat. Right? There is no single diet that's perfect for everybody. Okay? The best available evidence does not support the blanket demonization of fat and saturated fat. A more nuanced approach recognizes beef's nutritional value and the importance of overall dietary patterns. But I will add to that. If you look at what's available at the grocery store, if your goal is to get the most nutritional dense food you can eat with the least amount of anti-nutrients and the lowest amount of inflammatory factors when you eat it, then beef is by far your best choice. Moving forward with evidence-based nutrition. The conflicting message about beef can confuse consumers trying to make informed food choices. The best approach is to look beyond headlines and examine the quality of the evidence. Extensive, well-designed studies consistently fail to find connections between unprocessed red meat consumption and chronic disease. In fact, they find just the opposite. Meanwhile, the nutritional benefits of beef are well established. For those in the beef industry, These findings provide an opportunity to reframe the conversation around beef. Rather than defensively responding to criticisms, the industry can confidently promote beef's role in a nutritious diet. The story of beef and health is more complex than we've been led to believe. Far from being a dietary villain, beef may be one of the most nutrient-dense foods available. It is probably one of the most nutrient-dense foods available, period. Providing essential nutrients in highly bioavailable forms. And that's key. Gram for gram, the bioavailability of nutrients, minerals, amino acids, vitamins that come from beef are much higher than any plant-based foods. It's time to reconsider whether beef truly deserves its bad reputation or has been unfairly maligned by dietary guidelines that weren't based on the most substantial scientific evidence, if any, quite honestly. Science increasingly suggests that beef isn't just acceptable in moderation. For many people, it may be an ideal food for supporting metabolic health, and if it's a big part of your carnivore diet, should occupy 75, 80, 85% of your total consumption, right? It is probably the number one staple food, ruminant meat, and that's beef, lamb, bison, right? Are the most stable form of food that's good for the body, good for the brain, good for your health, and good for the planet. I've got videos talking about how beef is raising ruminant animals in a regenerative farming system is far better for the planet than almost anything else we do. Beef's back on the table. Okay? I want to thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the appropriate section. If you have any ideas for what you may like to see in an upcoming video, leave them to me. I love getting comments and things I can work on for you as part of this community to help us keep informed. Thank you very much.